So today we're going to go ahead and unbox the Hot Toys Iron Man Mark III diecast. So I think I pre-ordered this back in January, so it's been quite a bit of a wait for this to show up. A lot of people still consider the Mark III to be one of the definitive Marvel Cinematic Universe Iron Man armors. It's got a very classic comic book look to it. It's very simple. This is actually the third release of the Mark III that Hot Toys has put out. They put out two plastic versions prior to this, a normal version and a battle damaged version. Both were entirely plastic, and they had some proportion issues. They've recently started using die-cast materials to make certain Iron Man armors. So this is a reissue of the Mark III, which is why it's only just coming out now, even though the movie was quite a while ago. So let's open it up and take a look. Alright, so we'll start by taking a look at the box that the figure comes in. I have to say that this is just really cool. I don't know if the camera's going to pick this up, but you have this kind of gloss plastic material over this top part of the box here. And some of the Iron Man is printed underneath and some is printed on this this plastic sheath here, and it gives it a very cool sort of 3D diagram look. I don't usually care much about the boxes. As far as I'm concerned, they're just a figure delivery system, and once I've taken the figure out, these things get stored in a closet. And this one will too, but I do think that this is one of the more attractive figure boxes that I've seen. So obviously you have all of your credits here, the sculptor, the painter, etc., etc. Out front here, Iron Man, the Mark III. It's MMS256, which is Movie Masterpiece Series 256, diecast number 7, meaning it's the 7th diecast figure that they've put out. Basically, diecast, in terms of these figures, it just means that some of the parts are made from a diecast metal, which makes the figure heavier than an entirely plastic figure, and that is the only benefit to a diecast release. And because frankly, just by looking at it, you cannot tell a plastic piece from a die-cast piece once they're all painted. So it really just comes down to the extra heft that the figure has. And if it's sitting on a shelf, again, that's not really going to translate very well. So while the die-cast releases are nice, they're not like really a huge selling point over a regular plastic release. But sometimes you just don't get a choice. They're going to put out an armor in die-cast or plastic, not both, so you don't really get to choose one or the other. So the die-cast figures, because they are heavier, they come in this two-part box here with the slip-off top. And then there's like a styrofoam coffin, I guess. And then you have here etched in the styrofoam. And then there's a tray underneath. That's where the stand and everything will be. And then once you open it, this is what you've got. I've opened it at tilt, so all these little accessories and swap out pieces don't fall out. But I'm going to go ahead and unbox this, and we'll take a look at everything it comes with. Alright, so here is the Mark III unboxed, lit up for you. You can see here that because it's a die-cast model, it comes with a much heavier duty stand. Usually the die-cast models come with these. Not always, though. The Age of Ultron War Machine Mark II was an exception. It came with a very flimsy base, which I thought was odd for such a heavy figure. But at any rate, you hit the nameplate Iron Man Mark III. It's got a pretty sturdy rod and clip here for holding the figure if you want. The Mark III, I'm blown away. It looks awesome. The proportions are so much better than the earlier plastic releases. The color's great. And again, I love the simple red and gold original look. It's fantastic. So we got a lot of accessories here, and we'll go ahead and take a look at those. The hand options are pretty standard for all of their Iron Man figures to date. You get the two closed fists, which you saw on the figure. You get two repulsor hands, and the difference for these is that the wrists are pre-bent for you, so when you stick them on the wrist peg, you kind of get that firing a repulsor blast pose. This is clear through here. There's a light in the forearm, so if you turn on the repulsor, this will light up. And then you get two completely articulated hands. Now these are always pretty amazing because they just have so many joints on them. You can see you can really get the thumb bends in, and it's got another joint at the knuckle, and then each of the fingers has a joint at the knuckle and two along the finger. So this is the hand you use if you want Iron Man flipping somebody off, or if Iron Man's rocking out. These are the hands I usually display my figures with, just because even if I still want a fist, this hand achieves that pretty well. So the figure comes with two helmets. You have the LED light-up helmet, which was on the figure, and then we also have a Tony Stark head sculpt in the helmet with a additional faceplate. You can still display him with the faceplate down, but then there's a magnet, so this holds this up here, and you can see Tony Stark inside the armor if you want. This is an updated head sculpt, a great likeness. They've been using it for all their most recent Iron Man figures. He comes with left and right forearm pieces, so these clip onto the forearms if you want to display him with the armor plates opened up and ready to fire some rockets. Same with the left and right shoulder plates. The Mark III has these little weapons that pop out here. These are somewhat articulated. You can sort of aim them a little bit. And finally, these two little hip pieces. These pop out of the hips and fire like countermeasures. On the original Mark III, these were actually spring-loaded, and anytime you tried to pose the figures, they'd sort of pop out, and it was really obnoxious. You had to kind of, turn them back in. So these just clip on now, and I think that's a much better option. And finally, the figure comes with this alternate midsection, like a rotated abdominal piece. And this is weird, and this has got a lot of people upset. The original Mark III didn't have ab articulation either, but everybody sort of thought because they're redesigning and re-releasing this figure that they would add it. They decided not to for whatever reason. I'm sure that they had some reason, but instead they give you this swap out ab piece. Now you can use this ab piece for some more dynamic action poses. It's primarily to get the sort of iconic three-point landing pose that Iron Man is known for, and we'll give that a shot when we get to the posing section of this review. So speaking of articulation, we'll go ahead and take a closer look at the figure itself. So the head can move side to side, roughly that much. It can look up quite a bit, which is actually really nice if you want to do sort of a flying pose. Not many of the Iron Man armors, I think, can look up quite that much, so that's nice. The figure can move its head forward and backwards if you want to kind of have him grooving. So these shoulder pieces are held in by a magnet. They pop off pretty easily, and this is where you swap in the weapons deployed version if you want to display it that way. So moving on to the shoulder bells do move. They're on a kind of a spring-loaded system here, so they'll move out of the way as you rotate his arm around. You can move up and back. His arm bends at the elbow. The fists rotate around. So this chest and the ab piece will actually clip off if you'd like to get a look at the inner workings of the suit. Go ahead and put that back on. Taking a look at the back of the figure here, he does have his air flaps which deploy. These are quite articulated. There's a few different layers to these. I will point out that in unpackaging this figure, these metal foils here had a very irritating plastic wrap on them, which was incredibly annoying to get off. But there you have his various air flaps for flight mode. Moving down to the waist, as I mentioned before, there is no ab crunch. There is no ab articulation whatsoever. And again, that's very odd for an Iron Man figure these days. I'll show you the Mark 43 in a moment, just so you can compare. But there's no bend here. There's no twist. Pretty much this entire torso is one solid piece. Now, if you compare that to the die-cast Mark 43, you can see he's at least got some movement. It's all separate pieces here. So it's a little bit disappointing that the Mark III, that they didn't redesign it in a way. And it may just come down to the design of the armor. You see that the Mark 43 has it is a much busier midsection. So it's a little bit easier to segment some of those pieces, whereas the Mark III's torso is very clean and very broad plates. So they may not have been able to cut that up without ruining the look of that armor. As we move down to the waist, you see that these hip flaps actually move up and out of the way. That's really helpful for some more of the dynamic posing with the legs and whatnot. This is something that they started doing with the last few Iron Man releases, and it really does increase the overall articulation of the figure, so that's pretty nice. You can see here that these two pieces lifted up out of the way lets me get quite a bit more leg articulation than you would if it was a solid piece. Down to the knees are in fact double jointed. There's a single joint there, and there's a second joint a little bit lower, which helps you get some not quite, all the way back. There's obviously it's armor, so it's not going to go all the way back like a human leg would, but that's still pretty nice for, again, more dynamic flying poses and probably that three-point landing that we were talking about earlier. Moving on to the calves, you can see that we have additional air flaps with like a lot of nice mechanical detail in there. The heel flap moves, the foot moves up and down, forward. You got a little bit of toe articulation right here. Which brings us to the next big gripe of this figure, and that's the fact that there is no side-to-side ankle articulation. You have forward to back, which is pretty nice, but most Iron Man figures these days come with side-to-side ankle articulation, which again really just improves the overall articulation of the entire figure and the variety of poses that you can get him into quite a bit. So that's a little disappointing that for some reason they weren't able to incorporate side-to-side ankles on this figure. So there we have the Iron Man Mark III die-cast edition. I absolutely love the figure. I mean, I think the color is gorgeous, the armor is fantastic. As much as I like the newer armors that Tony wears, which are much more detailed and they have a lot more going on, there's just something to be said for this very classic, sort of more simple, earlier armor. If you typically display your figures in museum pose, obviously you're all set. He looks fantastic. If you prefer more extreme dynamic posings, you're going to have some problems with the abs and the ankles, which is really unfortunate. But that's not to say that it's impossible to get him into some interesting looking poses. So we're going to go ahead and try that now, see what sort of poses we can come up with, starting with the very iconic three-point landing pose. So in the process of getting him into that pose, I'm just going to show you guys a couple of interesting details on this armored spine here. There are some cleverly hidden buttons here. This one right at the tailbone here will actually drop the whole leg section down, which again lets you get some more bend out of your figure. And then we have a button right up here that attaches the top torso section right here that will remove the torso from the lower legs. Alright, so here we've used that rotated ab section to achieve Iron Man's three-point landing pose, and honestly I gotta say it looks pretty good. This is definitely a lot closer to the three-point landing pose than I've been able to achieve with any of the other Iron Man figures that don't have that sort of pre-rotated ab section. So while I am disappointed that there isn't actual ab articulation, the fact that you can get him into this pose so easily with that piece almost makes up for it, because I would kind of like at least one of my Iron Men to be displayed in this pose. So here we have a slightly different pose, also using the rotated ab section, just to show that you can definitely get some pretty neat poses out of your figure despite its shortcomings. So due to the weight of the die-cast figures, they don't include the more dynamic stands. Like some of the figures have, this rod is actually made out of a pretty sturdy bendy material, so you can have your figures jumping or leaping or whatever, but they do not support the weight of the die-cast figures. So you have to get a little bit creative. I actually have this clipped right around his hip right there, so I'm basically using the figure's own weight to keep it in place. Posing like this at your own risk. I'm just showing you definitely what some of the options are. And here we have another pretty cool dynamic pose with that twisted waist. A little bit more stable because he's got a foot down and he's clamped around the waist. So all in all, I feel like while this figure has a few shortcomings in terms of design, they're pretty easy to overcome. Now, if this was going to be the only Iron Man in your whole collection, you probably won't have the same range of motion as if, say, you picked up the Mark 43 or even maybe the Mark 45, which is coming out next year. But it's still a really solid display piece, and certainly if you have more than one Iron Man, you can achieve different poses with both of them. So the die-cast Mark III is actually now currently shipping from Sideshow Collectibles. They also just posted a summer exclusive, which is a stealth repaint of this particular armor, which I think looks really cool. I don't expect that one to last long because the exclusives don't usually stick around very long. So I'll post a link to that in the description, and thank you for watching the review.